Hello, my darlings, and welcome back to my channel. For those of you that are new here, my name is Miranda, and I am the Enchantress of Avalon. In today's video, we are going to be discussing the honey golden energy of the solar divine feminine. And I love this topic because I think it doesn't get talked about enough. The solar energy, the sun goddess energy, because we think of the solar as masculine normally in most of Western myth and legend. So I love discussing this, and we're going to get on into that as I thought this was a great topic for June 1st as we're getting into the summertime. But before then, I do want to give my normal little reminders. Firstly, that other than running this YouTube channel, I also have a priestess business, White Rose of Avalon, which is at whiteroseofavalon.life, my website. And I have a blog on there that's always free to read for anyone. But I also sell services. I have tarot readings, channeled readings, and mentoring sessions that you can order, and I teach online classes. And actually my upcoming class, Lessons from Celtic Mermaids, which is a 7-week long deep dive into Celtic mermaid legends and lore and helping you build a relationship with Celtic mermaids, is going to be opening for enrollment on June 20th for the summer solstice. And actually, I already have a waitlist open. So down in the description box below, you will be able to find my email. If you want to join the waitlist, you just email me and I will add you to the waitlist. So with all of that being said, let's get into the solar divine feminine discussion. So as I said, the solar divine feminine, solar goddesses, sun goddesses, solar fairy queens. This is very present in Celtic folklore and Celtic mythology, but it isn't so present in other mythologies. So we often ignore it because we're married to this dichotomy that women are the moon, men are the sun. Moon, feminine, sun, masculine. And that's it. No deeper than that. It's just automatic. However, first of all, the Celts aren't the only ones that have sun goddesses, but the Celtic myths are rife with sun goddesses. And in fact, there's only really one goddess I can think of that is specifically lunar in Celtic lore, and that's Arianrhod. And it's because her name means silver wheel, and she's a goddess associated with cycles. And so we do think of her as quite lunar. But even so, directly in her legend, there isn't anything that tells us she's actually a moon goddess. We actually only have an association with her and the constellation Corona Borealis. So she's a star goddess, that's for sure. Because Corona Borealis in Welsh is Caer Arianrhod, the castle of Arianrhod. So very interesting. And that's also why a lot of people say she has links with Ariadne, because Ariadne is obviously also tied to the Corona Borealis, also tied to weaving, because she uses thread to guide Theseus and the Minotaur situation and everything. So they do have similar overlap in some ways. And beyond that, also the names, Ariadne, Arianrhod, they are etymologically similar. Totally different languages, but etymologically similar, which is interesting. But we're not talking about that. I'm just wanting to really give a background in just how much the solar feminine is more omnipresent in Celtic mythology, folklore, legend than the lunar. The moon is important. The moon's always important. But the Celts weren't necessarily this dichotomy has to exist. Only the sun can be viewed as masculine, only the moon can be viewed as lunar. This is something that we do see in other mythologies. I think a lot of people really holds fast to this idea because we grow up first knowing Greco-Roman myth, right? We're taught this in school as, this is the building blocks upon which literature ended up being built, because these are the first stories that were really told and written down and what have you. And they inspire a lot of literature, as well they should. They're amazing. But, we're told of Artemis and Apollo. Artemis, the goddess of the moon, and Apollo, the god of the sun. Although, really, we pare it back, they are not the embodiments of those planets. Selene is the embodiment of the moon, and Helios is the embodiment of the sun. Artemis is a lunar goddess, but not the actual planet. And Apollo is a solar god, but not the actual sun. Just clarity's sake. So this is really ingrained in us, right, from a young age. And then there's the obvious thing that, oh, well, of course the moon is feminine because the moon controls the tides. Water is feminine. And the moon's cycle is roughly the same length as the female menstrual cycle is. So clearly this is tied together. Okay, I'll give you that, of course. Not taking away feminine lunar ties. I just want to really dig into feminine solar ties. There's a lot. Firstly, think of how many goddesses are described as golden. When I introduced the topic for this video, I talked about this as that honeyed golden energy. Gold, right? We hear golden goddess all the time. We do hear golden god sometimes too, especially in relation to solar deities. But this is a pretty common turn of phrase. And Aphrodite is associated with being a golden goddess. We have plenty of golden busts of goddesses and these goddesses draped in gold. And that's where we come into the first solar fairy queen we're going to discuss, and that is Rhiannon. Now, you might be a little bit confused if you aren't really into reading the oldest folklore. If you haven't read the Mabinogion a bunch of times like I have, you might not immediately say Rhiannon and sun goddess, but she absolutely is. And here's the thing. I do know that you can look up things online with modern worship that say Rhiannon is a lunar goddess, a moon goddess. Now, can you work with Rhiannon in a nighttime way? And can you say she's associated with the moon? Maybe in your personal practice she is. I won't take that from you if it's your personal gnosis. But I think this Rhiannon as moon goddess thing is really rooted in her ties to the bridge between life and death. Because of the Adar Rhiannon, her birds, they are her sacred songbirds, and they can lull the living to sleep and wake the dead. So this tie with her being this very much so goddess governing life and death is a very much what we think of as a nighttime energy. It's dark moon energy. It's the darker feminine energy because you're governing over death, the crone energy governing over death. But she's womb and tomb because she is a great goddess. And here's the thing. When we first see Rhiannon in the Mabinogion, the very, very first reference to her in the first branch, when she appears, Push or Pwyll, I'm going to call him Pwyll. I think that might be right. I'm really working on my Welsh, so I know I've said Welsh names a lot of different ways on this channel over the years. I am trying so hard to get better at pronouncing Welsh. It is a beautiful language, but a very difficult one to learn, especially to speak it. As far as understanding it and reading it, I'm getting better, but speaking, I'm working on it. Anyway, I'll call him Pwyll. He's her husband. Well, when Pwyll goes to Gorsedd Arbeth, which is this mound, He is looking to see what will happen, because it is said that when a nobleman or a royal sits on the Gorse of Larbeth, they will either be beaten by physical blows or they will see a wonder. Now, Pwyll is lucky. He sees wonder. That wonder is Rhiannon. She is riding on her pure white mare. Obviously, she's a horse goddess and a sovereignty goddess. Of course, she's on a white mare. And she is completely bedecked in gold. She is veiled in gold. And that is why so many of us who work with Rhiannon, I myself do priestess to Rhiannon. She's one of the 5 fairy queens I priestess to. We often refer to her as golden veiled Rhiannon or gold veiled Rhiannon, because this is the first description we have of her. Her with the golden veil. She's riding from the other world. And of course, Pwyll wants to get her attention. He sends a rider after her. No way. She doesn't change her pace, but they can't catch her. The next day, he sends a rider on a faster horse. Still doesn't work. Third day, he himself gets on the fastest horse in his command and he chases after her. And he cannot catch her until he finally just says, "My lady, in the name of the man you love best, please stop." And she immediately stops and she turns to him, and ever the flirty and sarcastic remark of, "Gladly, but it would have been better for your horse if you'd asked me sooner." Amazing. It's amazing. I love a lot of these moments where a fairy queen goddess first meets her lover, because it's very flirty, and often, like in the modern age, it sounds kind of sarcastic. And I love it, because you're just like a wink and a nod, acknowledging that, hey, this could have been easier for you. Or, hey, why aren't you paying attention to me, kind of thing. It's really endearing. Anyway, in any case, though, Rhiannon and him meet, and then they, of course, end up making a plan to be married, because she doesn't want to marry the man that her father wants her to marry. And being a Welsh goddess, she is able to at least choose her husband or approve of the choice, because even in medieval Welsh society, a woman couldn't be forced to marry against her will. She had to at least consent to the union, and Rhiannon wasn't going to consent to marrying this fairy man that her father wanted her to marry. Instead, she went and sought out a husband of her own. And it's also needs to be noted that Pwyll already had a connection to the other world. He'd already actually been to the other world. He had switched places with the god of the other world, a god, obviously one of many, Araun, who is its god of death. And they swapped places and then swapped back. But when Pwyll had really proven himself to Araun, not only by completing the task Araun wanted of him, but also by knowing that he never actually tried to make a move on Araun's wife, which really piqued his interest. He's like, "You slept in the same bed as this woman for an entire year, and you did not sleep with her." Of course, Araun cleared it up and said, "Yeah, that was not me." And she's surprised as well. "Oh, okay. Well, that makes sense why you were rejecting me for an entire year." You think it would have come up sooner, but it's a legend. We will let it slide. In any case, so Rhiannon probably already knew of Pwyll and knew of his encounter with Araun, knew of him being associated with the other world, because he's often referred to as Pen Annwn, like, so he has association with the other world. So he's a good choice. Out of the mortals she could choose to marry, he's a good choice. And that also leads me into, Another way that we can kind of think of like why solar divine feminine in the Celtic context, and that is the other world itself. The other world, when we get to the point of Arthurian lore, the other world is referred to as the Summerlands or the Summer Country, Summer Isles. It's usually Summer Country or Summerlands. So we already have this very solar tie to the entire other world in Celtic lore because of the Arthurian legends. We have Guinevere being kidnapped by Melwas or Melegrand, depends on the telling, and he also goes by other names, but it's usually, if it's an M-E-L name and he's near Guinevere, it's likely the exact same character because he's gonna kidnap her. If you ever are reading an Arthurian retelling and someone with a name that starts with the letters M-E-L is taking an interest in Guinevere, there's a kidnapping that's going to happen pretty soon. I guarantee it. And this is from someone who's read a lot of Arthurian retellings. But yes, so we have the Summerlands, the Summer Country, for all of the other worlds. Of course, Avalon is the other world as well, but an otherworldly island. So there are steps to get to Avalon, right? You have to board the barge, part the mists, and actually get to Avalon, get onto the shores. Whereas the Summerlands, like the rest of the other world, there aren't islands. The parts of the other world that aren't an island, you don't have to go through all these steps. You can kind of just accidentally end up there. And that's why we have all these ideas of, it's so easy to get to fairy. You could just kind of, oops, pop through a portal and you're in fairyland. Because fairyland is the other world as well. It goes by a lot of names. But all the same thing. It really does boil down to the same thing. So the Summerlands is that by the time the Arthurian legends are the main source of Celtic myth. And it's endlessly fascinating to me to think of this very solar link. It's always that solar link. So let me grab my notes and see what else. I talked about one of the primary Welsh examples of a solar fairy queen goddess, but in Ireland, one of the primary examples would be Anya, who is a goddess associated with midsummer. She is a fairy queen. She is a goddess associated with fertility and sexuality. And she is very much a solar goddess. She is celebrated midsummer because of this, because she's solar. And she's a wonderfully beautiful energy. And she's a protector of especially women. Women who've known abuse also. That's an interesting subset because Anya herself does know abuse in some of her myths. Not going to get into the heavy stuff, but I did want to note that. And that's two tidbits I want to note about Anya. I do actually have an old video all about her, or maybe I have two old videos all about her on this channel if you wanted to know more. But is that Anya has a mermaid form. So yeah, she is a water and solar fairy queen, which she's not the only one. We're going to get to another water solar goddess. And the last tidbit is she has a connection with St. Patrick because she was the whole idea of like driving the snakes out of Ireland. There are ties that like she was also some like a specific goddess he tried to drive out. It's very interesting to dig into, and I actually think I have a video specifically on the Anya and St. Patrick thing that I did for St. Patrick's Day probably a good 3 years ago, if not longer. But you have those to peruse at your leisure if you wanted to watch that after this. Now, the next goddess is, and the final goddess I'm going to talk about. I'm going to then just talk about really working with this energy, but okay, the final goddess is Sulis. Sulis is the goddess of the hot springs in Bath, the thermal springs in Bath, England. And she is both a solar goddess and obviously a water goddess. Her sacred site is a hot spring. And she is a very important figure. She is very attested to. Her worship is very much so found in the archaeological evidence. There is a beautiful, what's a head of her statue. That's what's left of the statue. It's this beautiful head of Sulis. Obviously, we still have a lot of archaeological evidence directly in her thermal springs. So very, very potent energy, powerful goddess. And she is one of the goddesses that was worshipped by the Romans during the Roman occupation. Because obviously the Romans are the ones who built the baths. This is a hot spring, it's a thermal spring. They built the baths that gave Bath, England the name. And she was obviously very represented there, but under the name of Sulis Minerva. Now, it's important that they never took her name away. They syncretized her with Minerva, which is very common. That's something that the Romans did. But a lot of times they would just go by Roman names when they were worshiping even Celtic deities. But when it comes to Sulis, when it comes to Coventina, who also was syncretized with Minerva, so Coventina, Minerva, the name wasn't fully stripped, which is very interesting. And then Epona in Gaul is actually the only goddess they didn't syncretize, apparently. Her name was left just Epona, which is very interesting. And it's a perfect segue back to Rhiannon, because Epona and Rhiannon are often linked and often syncretized together because they're both horse goddesses. And there's the sovereignty ties. So yeah, very, very interesting. So as I said, if you're looking for specific goddesses to study that are solar fairy queens, solar goddesses of Celtic mythology and Celtic belief, those are three I would look into this midsummer. I would look into Rhiannon and Anya and, of course, Sulis. And yeah, maybe create rituals with them. I will be sharing a lot more content about the golden goddess energy, about solar goddesses in the coming weeks, both on my blog and on my Patreon. I will also be doing a ritual to Anya that'll be shared on my Patreon for the summer solstice if you're interested. So, oh, and my Patreon, I didn't mention it before, it is Avalonian Rose Fairy Mysteries, and it's always linked in the description box below. Yeah, so if you're interested in my Patreon, you can always go ahead and join. And we're actually just entering the final month of my Practical Magic Book Club over there. We are reading the final book in the series, which is the Book of Magic, in, preparation for the film coming out in September. So yeah, it's been wonderful so far. If you want to join at any of my 3 paid tiers, you can participate in the book club. Alrighty, so let's move on to embracing this golden goddess energy, embracing the honeyed golden energy of the solar divine feminine. What does that mean to embrace this, to really lean in and say, this is something I want to work with? Well, the first step is look up and study the stories of solar goddesses. And again, like I said, the goddesses I was discussing, and there are more solar goddesses in Celtic lore, but they're not the only ones. Celtic goddesses aren't the only solar goddesses that there are. Look them up from all over the world, see what ones pull you in, and work with them. You can work with Aphrodite in her golden goddess aspect, in that very golden honeyed aspect. She is that mingling of Venus and the moon. Venus and the sun. What am I saying? That's the mingling. The golden goddess is the mingling of Venus and the sun. And in a lot of ways, this is inextricably linked. for solar goddesses, there is, to me, often this hint of this link between the sun and Venus. And I work a lot with this link because I do work deeply with the Celtic Venusian energy and Venusian energy in general. So when I'm working with solar energy, I'm often incorporating a lot of Venusian energy in that. And the sun and Venus do have some links. Obviously, we could think of the fact that they both have links to star energy, because the sun obviously is a star and Venus is known as the morning star and the evening star. We have the fact that Venus is a very hot planet, not nearly as hot as the sun, but it's a very hot planet. So there's that, like, this Venus tie is in there. And so I'm just looking at my notes. You can work with this energy also by kind of looking at your birth chart, not only seeing what your sun sign is, but do you have Leo in your birth chart? Because Leo is the sign ruled by the sun. And I myself have a lot of Leo energy. It's very potent in my birth chart across the board, because for those who might not know, I actually do work more with sidereal astrology and Vedic astrology than I do with Western tropical, just because I feel more pulled to it and it just feels more accurate for me in my life. But if you prefer tropical, that's awesome. And yeah, so I have a lot of Leo, no matter what. I have a Leo stellium, no matter if it's my sidereal chart or my tropical chart. And I have a Leo ascendant in tropical, but I have a Leo sun and moon in sidereal. So yeah, there's tons of that. And if we move into Vedic, my specific sun and moon is in the nakshatra. Nakshatras are lunar mansions. There are 27 worked with in Vedic astrology. And the specific nakshatra that my sun and moon fall in, because my sun and moon are conjunct, I was born on a new moon, is the nakshatra of Purva Falguni. Purva Falguni is a nakshatra very associated with golden energy. Actually, it's a very blessed, abundant energy. Very, very auspicious. That was the word I was looking for, auspicious. It's considered an auspicious nakshatra. But it is ruled by Venus, because all of the nakshatras have their own planetary rulership, and they also all have their own elemental rulership, and it's a water nakshatra. So yeah, I have a very watery chart, but also a very solar chart. And that's why I'm drawn to solar fairy queens and Venusian fairy queens and all this water. Well, incarnated mermaid is also the water, but there's a lot of reasons. So yeah, it's actually really fascinating to see these things come together. And then there's, other than looking into your birth chart, which I do suggest looking into it and seeing, oh, where does the sun fall? Where does my Leo energy fall? Even if you don't have Leo placements, what house is Leo in? These are things to look into to see where that solar energy is in your chart, that golden energy. And then the next thing I would say is little things, spending time in the sun, letting the sun warm your skin. Obviously, I'm very fair skinned, as you can see. I have to wear a lot of sunscreen, but I do love going out and just being in the sun when it's a bright sunny day. And it helps really kind of reset my nervous system in a lot of ways, especially if I'm also earthing, walking barefoot in the ground, in the grass. I do suggest earthing to everyone. It is very grounding and very nourishing for your nervous system. But these are little things you could do to start to embrace Sorry if you could hear that motorcycle going by. That's why I paused. But these are little things that you could start to embrace this solar golden goddess energy. And yeah, I'm gonna obviously also be doing an entire blog post closer to the summer solstice, actually right before the summer solstice, that's gonna dig into this a little bit more. But I did want to give a taster in this video. And then I would say, I do want to note the mermaids and the sun, okay? And I actually wrote about mermaids and solar energy on Patreon a week or two ago. I think when this video comes out, I think this would have been like a week and a half, almost 2 weeks. And again, mermaids, because of the water and the tides being ruled by the moon, are usually thought of as lunar. But there is this energy that is very also tied to solar energy, and most prominently, I think of it as sun glitter. That glitter that the sun creates when it is on the water. It is, first of all, one of the most beautiful sights you'll ever behold. And second of all, it's pure enchantment. It's magical. And that is mermaidy. And also, we do tend in a lot of media to see mermaids with these kind of solar associated colored tails. I think of H2O Just Add Water. They all had golden tails, these like an orangey gold tail. Obviously, Splash, Madison's tail is that deep orangey gold and more orange than gold, but gorgeous. And even within the water, there is golden coral. It exists. It's not common, but it does exist. And of course, we have red coral, which again has that fiery association. Red coral being much more common than golden coral. And then also, I think of the sunrise and the sunset over the water on the beach. Again, one of the most beautiful sights you'll see. And the colors that are over that water are these very warm solar colors, obviously, because it's sunrise, sunset. We're seeing oranges and pinks, purples, sometimes pinks and purples and things. Purple, of course, being a cooler color, but it's red and blue mixed, so there's still some warmth in there over this water. So yeah, there's a link there. And again, if you're interested, that there is that post on Patreon. If you were interested in joining my Patreon anyway, that is something you'd have access to. And yeah, that is about everything. I'm just, again, obviously checking my notes. That is everything I wanted to say with this. I just really have been, again, thinking about this energy, feeling this energy grow more prominent because we are so close to the summer solstice now. We're only a couple weeks away. And just in general, I love this energy. I love the solar fairy queens and solar goddesses. And I wanted to share a little bit about them with you. And I hope that if this has intrigued you, you will seek out, reading the Mabinogion, reading Rhiannon's stories. She is primarily in the first branch. She's also in the third branch. And there's a reference to the Adar Rhiannon in the second branch, but she herself does not appear. Only her birds appear. But such an important figure in the Mabinogion. Seek out looking up images associated with these goddesses, looking up other solar goddesses and golden goddesses. And yeah, and there's, like I said, there's so much beauty in it, so much. And yeah, what better energy to deepen into as the sun gets warmer, the days get longer, and we're feeling playful in the sun than the sun herself in these feminine variants. Of course, if you want to work with the solar masculine, that's obviously amazing, and there's plenty of lore on that. But not enough people talk about the solar feminine. So as someone very rooted in the divine feminine and as a priestess of several fairy queen goddesses, I want to talk about it when summer comes. And also, I don't hear enough people talking about the sun and Venus and how these things are linked, and how solar energy can be worked with the Venusian energy, and that there is this link between this kind of like love goddess energy and this solar energy. Because again, these solar fairy queens were often very sexual and had a very deep sense of the lover goddess energy in them as well, including, of course, Rhiannon and Anya. So I will leave you with that, and I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please do, like, comment, subscribe, and check out everything linked below. And I will see you in the next video.